Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for Lifetime's webinar. This is our adoption Q&A for hopeful adoptive parents. My name is Kim King. I'm co-hosting with Libby Denniston, coasting, I hope, as we coast through the next hour, answering your questions that are on your minds. There are a variety of ways that you can reach out to us if you have questions or updates, just want to start the conversation or continue the conversation with us here at Lifetime. The phone number is 1-800-923-6784. That is our 24/7 hotline, primarily used for birth mom support, but adoptive parents can reach us through that line as well. And you can also email any questions to adopt@lifetimeadoption.com if you don't already have a coordinator. If you do have a coordinator, then of course you should be reaching out to your coordinator with questions, especially if there are any questions that you have on your mind that we don't end up being able to answer this evening. Sometimes we just have so many questions that 1 hour isn't long enough, especially as we get into different discussions. You never know where the night's going to take us, or at least the next hour. You can also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/open.adoption. You can visit us online at lifetimeadoption.com. There you will find a variety of FAQs, articles, our blog. You can view a variety of, different types of information on both sides of the adoption process, birth mom side and adoptive parent side. And you can fill out your free application right there on the website at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. lifetimeadoption.com/apply takes you right to the start page of the application, and there isn't any obligation in filling that out. It just helps us start that conversation so that we can understand a little more, have some insight as to where you might be coming from, and a little bit about your characteristics and what you might be starting to consider as preferences in your adoption. So it gives us a good framework for communicating with you and pointing you in the right direction, whether or not we end up being a great fit to work together. It gives us a good basis also to answer questions tailor-fit to your circumstances, because there's not always the same answer for a question depending on who's asking and what their adoption needs are. So thank you for being with us, and Libby, thank you for setting this up for us.
Well, you're welcome. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes up. And Kim, you and I were talking right before the webinar began about how we feel like it's been a long time since you and I co-hosted a webinar, but really it's only been probably a few weeks. And I would just like to remind all of you that if you're looking for past webinars, you can go to adoptionteleconference.com and catch up on anything you may have missed recently. But also you can find some upcoming webinars there too. For instance, we have one coming up Tuesday. Primarily the inspiration was to focus on questions about transracial adoption, about adopting a child of a race different than your own. But I think it's going to be an awesome resource for any adoptive parent, because the reality is when you welcome a child home that is not biologically related to you, you probably will face questions that other parents who only have biological children don't face. So we welcome anyone who's thinking about adopting, or who has already adopted, or who is currently waiting to adopt, to join that webinar too. But tonight we get to focus on a variety of things. So it's really up to all of you. And we welcome those. And what I love on so many webinars lately, it's been awesome just to see the participation and people commenting and sharing resources that are even new to us. So you're helping us learn more about what you need and helping others too, and that's what we think is so great about coming together in this way. So Kim, I think I don't exactly know how to phrase this. This time of year, I tend to see a pattern with people where, we just kind of wrapped up with summer, and there's a short window in between summer and the holiday season where things seem a little slower. So what's your best recommendation, maybe for people who are just starting to research, or maybe they've been researching a long time but they're not really sure when it's a good idea to take the next step? What's your experience been with this time of year and the timing with people hoping to adopt?
Sorry, got a little distracted there. There's a family trying to get onto the webinar, and they called into the office asking for the phone number.
Oh, dear. Okay. I'll share a little bit about my experience if you want to answer them.
Sure, great.
What I've noticed is, and this is good advice even for those of you on the call who are maybe in the middle of steps to complete a home study or to get your profile done. So no matter the phase you're in, if there's something on your mind that you have a next step point of action, it's like submitting documents or completing your website or applying or taking time for a phone consultation to learn more. I would encourage you not to put that off, because I see a tendency once middle October, especially late October rolls around, and we definitely get into November, December, people will often put off steps or phases to their adoption, or they will think, I'll just wait until after the new year. But in our experience, it's so common for people to get to New Year or after or February and wish they'd started sooner. So it's a really good tip if, for instance, if you're on the call tonight and you've just sort of been eyeing the Facebook page, maybe even looking at our website, coming to webinars, but you haven't taken steps to really learn more about whether or not Lifetime would be a good fit specifically for you, take those steps. If you're on the call right now and you're already working with Lifetime and you've been putting off maybe adding a video to your website or updating your profile that's been active for 6 months, or completing a home study, for instance, take those steps now. Set a goal now so that you can finish that before the holiday rush begins, because all of our schedules start to fill up then. And sometimes the adoption things just sort of fall to the back burner, but they are always the things you wish you'd made a priority. So that's sort of my 2 cents on what I've seen with adoptive parents and this season, is just to encourage you to make the most of it right now, so that you don't become one of those people 4 months from now, 3 months from now, even 6 months from now who's saying, man, I wish I would have started back then. You know, it went so fast. And this is great too. There's a question here. How long does a home study usually take? And that can vary. Sometimes it depends on where you live. But on average, and I will say this is reassuring to birth parents too, they actually appreciate knowing that it takes 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes even 10, maybe 12 weeks, depending on where you live, to complete. And some of that depends on how quickly you get the necessary pieces submitted and completed. For instance, I know it takes a lot of time just to complete the application and submit all of the written documents that the home study worker will need to just begin the home study. But if you can chip away at that a little every day, it doesn't get overwhelming and you're not feeling like, wow, I just spent a whole weekend nose to paper filling this out. Now, if you're a person that would rather just plow through it in a whole day, go for it. But a lot of times we've heard from home study providers that the length of time to complete the home study process directly relates to how quickly the adoptive parents submit the necessary information. Yes, we had someone. The paperwork, yes. And so the best advice I keep hearing from adoptive parents who have already adopted is make time for it every day. Do something every day, because then once it's done, at least you can say, I have done everything, and you're not falling asleep at night thinking, oh my gosh, I keep putting that off, or there's still so much to do, I'm so overwhelmed. Chip away at it daily so that you stay on top of it, so you can feel productive rather than overwhelmed.
And you know, I think this chipping away at it has been coming up a lot in our conversations internally, just amongst staff, that we are encouraging adoptive parents to set a goal amount of time of how much of your day you're going to spend on your adoption. For example, you probably, the majority who are familiar with Lifetime, know that Marty set a goal of an hour a day to spend on her adoption. Now for her, that was probably a little bit more so that she could still pay attention to other aspects of her life and not just only focus on her adoption, because she'd probably be on the other end of the spectrum as far as like spending many hours a day. You know, but she found that she set a healthy boundary of an hour a day, chipping away at it. And we had interviewed a family a while back, Sean and Charlene, who adopted. They're a California family that adopted. Wow, I mean, we get these photo updates of their little girl and time is just flying by. But we did interview them, and that was one piece of advice that they had. You know, when you get that paperwork, it is just like the most paperwork you've probably ever seen in your life. But they said, you know what? One page at a time, we're going to chip away at it.
Well, and actually we had an adoptive mom, Jess, came on and shared her adoption story. Was it last month already, or maybe a couple months ago? It's all running together now. But she actually told me off the webinar, she made a good comparison too. She said, you know, the home study was a lot of work, but I sort of saw it as our labor. That was our labor process.
Mm-hmm.
So when she thinks about the birth mother who chose them to raise her daughter and everything she went through for them to become parents to this precious little girl, they look back and think, yeah, all of that was tedious, doing the home study, having social workers in and out, answering tons of questions, getting even your relatives to chime in with letters, all of it. You know, it was overwhelming, but it was their labor. It was their labor and delivery for that baby. So sometimes keeping perspective on the importance of it, but also that it's meaningful effort. Don't get bogged down or discouraged. Just think of it as every step we take is getting closer to the baby we want to add to our family. And like I was saying earlier, I cannot emphasize enough how much it reassures birth mothers to know what a home study entails. You know, a common question I hear from birth moms is, how do I know the adoptive parents are safe? How do you screen adoptive parents? And when we talk about the home study process, they are often amazed that you all go through that for her and her. So it really is confidence boosting to her. It's reassuring because her biggest fear is, I'm going to choose adoption and my child will be in a worse off situation than I'm in. So knowing that you've done what it takes to be safe, but also to prepare to bring this child home through adoption, really gives her a lot of comfort and peace of mind in choosing you. So, so pat yourselves on the back, especially if you've already gotten through it. And if you're at the front end facing it, just know that there are many, many, many people who have been where you are today, and it worked, and you can do it too. Let's see here. Good, I like to see everybody chiming in a little bit more. Okay, let's back up. Oh, yeah, this is sweet. Thank you, Jody. The home study is a cakewalk compared to what a birth mom has to go through. It's so true, and we don't ever want to minimize the efforts or the importance of the things that lead adoptive parents through the process, or simply to just choosing adoption, but definitely that kind of perspective I think is such a blessing to birth moms, because to us it also shows that when you can see it that way, just like Jody explained, you're going to be such a blessing to that birth mom. You're not going to take her for granted, and you're not going to play into her worst fears, which are you're going to forget all about her because you're using her for a child. You actually care about her. So I love to read that. Great. Let's see. And Kim, this is a good question, and we don't usually get it asked this specifically, but I think this would be good to talk about basically what makes for a successful family in Lifetime's program. This question says, does every adoptive family adopt a child through Lifetime? So let's talk more about what makes for a successful family.
Yes. Well, there are definitely some important sort of like benchmark requirements that families have to meet to even have the potential to expect to be able to adopt, the home study being one of those Everyone who adopts has to have a home study. If the family never gets their home study done, they've really just prevented their success because they didn't even, get the ball rolling, really. The home study is one of those core things that you definitely have to have in order to ever expect to be able to adopt. Not that you have to have that before you do anything else, but at least completing it within, or starting it within the first few weeks of starting the program with Lifetime, but definitely trying to complete that in a timely manner. Like, the 2-month mark, the 3-month mark, that's all very reasonable. Staying proactive with the home study. If you have a hiccup, don't let it derail you, but get through it and get back on track, Another thing is the profile. We will guide you through the profile development process. And, we're here to assist you. And if a family is getting stuck or stumped or not sure what to do, where to start, they're just feeling like a blank canvas and not really sure where to lay down that first brush stroke, call us, email your profile coordinator, call your profile coordinator. We will guide you and help you and get you off to a great start and then continue guiding you through each step of your profile development. But that's so important. I can just think back over the years how many families have just procrastinated on getting their profile done, and it really caused, a delay in their journey. And then making sure once that profile is approved by your profile coordinator that you are sending us the 50 copies that we need so that we can start to send those out to birth moms. And, over time, sometimes families run low on profiles and we need replenishments. And we try to give you plenty of time, little advance warning, like maybe a couple of weeks lead time to get those ready and shipped off to us so that we can continue to present those to birth moms without missing a beat. We will do what we can to be resourceful on our end. If a family does run out of profiles, there are things we can do, but it's not quite as good as your actual profile, being sent to that birth mom if that is what she's requesting. So profiles are important, not just to get it done, but also to follow the process of what your coordinator is suggesting in your profile. I just had a thought that I shared with a family recently that, really take the advice of your profile coordinator. If she's asking you to choose between a couple different options, then make a choice. But if she's trying to convince you that a certain option is better than the other, let her take the lead on that and let her have that final say, because she may be looking at it from a different perspective, whereas when you're looking at a certain photograph, you might be thinking, well, it's a matter of opinion. Mine is just as valid as hers, and I like this one better. But for her, from her perspective, knowing what is successful with birth moms and knowing which profiles are getting the interest, it may be more a matter of fact based on her experience that's leading her, to that suggestion. So really just letting her guide you and incorporating the advice that she's given, because it's with your best interest in mind, with your successful adoption in mind. So just keeping that in mind as you're going through it. And then also when you have that adoption opportunity, that you have a birth mom now interested in you. She has said that she wants to choose you for her baby, to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row so that you are able to move forward with that adoption at that time. So that adoption readiness, the profile, and the home study are 3 things that families definitely have to do in order to be successful. We can't predict whether or not a family is going to follow the program. So do all families who work with Lifetime end up with a baby? The answer is no. The families who don't follow the program have a really hard time, and they may not be successful. But all of the families who have all followed the program all have their opportunity to adopt. Again, we can't predict when exactly. It's not like we have just 20 babies coming down the pipeline and we know exactly when it's going to happen for a specific family.
Baby 3, yeah.
Right? Like, we wish that could be, because that would make things so much simpler, right? I mean, that would be wonderful. But the beauty of it is that it falls within God's timing, and when He has led that birth mom to have that peace in her heart about reaching out for the help, recognizing that she's in a situation she can't handle on her own. She's making an adoption plan, and she's picked you, chosen you. She feels that you are the perfect parents for her baby, and it's all going to happen, just exactly the way that it should, but we just can't predict exactly when. Some adoptions happen quickly, some just take more time, but the families who stick with it have all adopted.
It's so true. And Kim, I know you had a family email earlier this week just looking even for some encouragement, which I think sometimes I think it's easy to believe that people who are on the front end just researching adoption don't yet need the encouragement, that they don't yet need to remember that they're going to get through this time. But we know that most people come to adoption after a long road of trying to reach their dream of parenthood or growing their family. And sometimes people talk about waiting to adopt as a huge negative. And I don't mean to belittle that in any way, but from what we get to see every day, we see people answering the call to adopt, starting the process, taking the necessary steps, and we can't always predict the timing, but we see it working. And so I always think, well, would you rather start today and, wait a year or wait 2 years or something like that and welcome your child home, or would you rather keep dreading the wait and putting off starting, and 2 years from now you wish you'd started 2 years sooner? And when people are in the process of waiting, we know it's hard. I mean, our hearts go out, and sometimes words don't comfort. It's like when you have a loss or you're going through a really hard time that's confusing. There aren't always words to make sense between your mind and your heart. But what we know is the truth, and like Kim was explaining, all these details go into adoption success. But every journey is different, so you can't always predict it like some black and white math formula.
Right.
It's so personal because it's people involved. But I just keep coming back to trust. It's about trusting the process, trusting the people you choose to work with to get you to your goal. It's about trusting in faith that you've been called to this for a reason that's not just to dangle something out in front of you and tease you and torment you. It's about trusting a birth mom's decision. For instance, I saw a post earlier today from a family, and they were so discouraged and disheartened because birth mom had chosen another family over them. And I totally get that disappointment, feeling like, I mean, all of us have been there, even going back to junior high, you think of 2 girls standing in line to dance with 1 boy, and he can only choose one, to dance with at a time. I mean, we could debate that in club terms, but we've all had that feeling of being picked over, but to a birth mom, it's not usually a personal rejection. It's that she's choosing who she thinks is best for her baby. And why I think that's so important to remember is because she can only choose one family. For instance, we actually had several matches start up this week, and a couple of them were last minute, like baby was in delivery when adoptive parents were finding out about the match. And we posted about one of them on Facebook because it was such a great example of how adoptive parents do need to be ready to drop everything and go for that baby. And we could do a whole webinar on all the stories we have of people not dropping everything. But what I love is being able to focus on the people who do drop everything, that are truly, truly ready. And, in that post we saw some comments from people who they were excited for that family, but they were feeling a little discouraged for themselves because of the length of time they've been waiting to be chosen by a birth mom. And all I kept thinking was, but that birth mom could only choose one family. She can't choose all 12 of you or all 6 of you or even 2 of you. There's only one family she can ask to adopt a baby. And she chose the family she believed was best. And that is so good for the long term of your adoption, is to remember she's going to choose you for reasons that she may not even be able to put into words, but it couldn't have been any other family.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope when people can focus on that, that they can think, okay, yeah, I'm really discouraged today, but I know when I'm holding that baby, there's going to be another family that's going to wish they'd been chosen, but this birth mother, my child's birth mom, chose us for a reason. And it's not because she didn't like another family, it's because she liked us as the right fit. She found in us the best solution for her baby.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that that encourages someone. And yes, we have a couple here that says there are people that say no to last-minute adoptions. Yes. So we have another one here. We are ready, set to go. So, I mean, I can't tell you how often that is when we know that we can call people and they are ready to go. Sometimes, I just want to say, Kim, sometimes ready to go concept also just comes down to, are you ready to, you know, take an extended break at work and talk to her when she's ready, even if she's not due for a couple months? Are you willing to say, I need to step out for 20 minutes and make a phone call and go be available to a birth mother who needs to talk to you right then? So sometimes it's not always just about, okay, baby's in labor, we need you to go now. It's sometimes timing works out best. Maybe there's even a time zone issue with birth mom where maybe she's in California and when she gets off work at 7, well, you're in Virginia and that means it's 10 o'clock where you are. Maybe are you willing to stay up a little later past your normal comfort zone of talking on the phone and actually take a phone call from her? It's all kinds of different flexibility. So these are also important just to remember, again, to trust the process, to trust also that this is a temporary time.
Yes.
This is not something you're going to endure for 10 years, for 2 decades, or a lifetime. This is a temporary time leading up to your child, and then your family will resume normalcy once you bring that baby home.
I really like this scripture reference that one of our Lifetime families shared, Ecclesiastes 3. You were talking, I flipped over to it. It's that chapter about to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven, King James Version here. But you know, reference that, you guys. Write that down, Ecclesiastes 3. Many of you are probably familiar with it, especially once you get your eyes on it. But read through that, you know, meditate on that a little bit, and have that peace in your heart that his time is best. Because it says here, he hath made everything beautiful in his time. I love that. That's so awesome. So anyway, just a good scripture reference, too. Thank you, Lifetime family, for typing that in.
I love that. And that verse actually has come back to me like 3 times in the last month, so it's sort of funny.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's so true. And actually, you know, if you're on the call and that speaks to you, you know, ask yourself, do I trust God with my story? And if the answer is no, you may have some personal reflection time that's needed. And if the answer is yes, then ask for guidance to help make the most of this time. If you trust in faith that you've been led to this part of your story, then you have to trust that there's a reason and that it's leading somewhere positive. So I'm glad we got to touch on that, but I know we have a lot of good logistic questions too, so I want to be able to get time for those.
I have a question. Okay, so this listener, she typed in a question, and it deals with, you know, how do we know about like the medical condition, substance exposure, that type of thing. How does that all work in our program as far as learning about the birth mom and what things may be involved? You know, how do we go about all that?
Well, we have a team that is devoted to helping the women who are thinking about adoption and then all the way moving through the process once those women decide, yes, I want to start an adoption plan, I want to talk with a family. Before a Lifetime family gets connected, now I will say sometimes there are exceptions, like in last-minute situations where maybe we have limited information. We still share as much as we have, and we are in constant motion of trying to get it. But typically, average adoption starts with a birth mother who's still pregnant, and she may have weeks or a couple months left on her pregnancy, and she will complete a a short set of paperwork that asks questions about her prenatal care, about her family medical history, even about birth father's family medical history if she knows that information, or if she has connection with him and she can ask him to fill that in. But we also ask questions like, what are you looking for in adoptive parents? And what would you want your child to know about you and the reasons you're choosing adoption? And things that she can sort of lay out as a foundation for her baby's story and history. Most of these women are very, very honest. They often even share things that you wouldn't even think to share. For instance, I can't tell you how many times I will ask a woman about her substance use during pregnancy, and that she will usually say, oh, no, I don't smoke, I don't drink. I've just been taking prenatal vitamins, like that's a substance. I mean, it's so precious how important these questions are to her. She knows the value of these questions for her baby's health. But when there are times that a birth mom has used a substance, usually our experience is she's forthcoming. And especially, I would say, the ones who have used more regularly or heavily, or have used more serious recreational drugs, or who may even have a medical condition that they had a prescription that they know causes risks to a pregnancy, but they couldn't get off the prescription, or they didn't find out they were pregnant until a few months after using the prescription, things like that. They're usually very forthcoming and saying, now, I have been on this medication, or, well, yeah, I had a few drinks, or, yeah, I still smoke pot once in a while because I was so sick with morning sickness that it helped my appetite stay up. Whatever reasons, whatever history there is there, they're usually willing to share. So when it comes down to that, we're looking at all of that information before they get connected with the adoptive parents. And so we're really trying to line her up with choosing from a selection of adoptive families that we know have already said we're open to considering situations like this, opportunities that have these instances. So I hope that sort of helps to outline it. We can't predict everything. I mean, I will say I'm in my 30s, and Kim, I know you have your own experience, which is completely unique even to mine because of your mom's history, but there are things I don't know the answers to all of my family medical history. I mean, my grandparents are gone. Now my parents are both gone. Like, there's only so many places I can get those answers. So some of it is going to come from me. And Kim, I know that you've shared before on webinars, your mother was adopted and there was no information. So your family sort of starting fresh with medical history in your generation.
Even beauty history. This might seem funny, but it stems back to international adoption and not having any knowledge or pictures of relatives on that side of the family, biological relatives, that is. My daughter and I were doing a facial mask last night. She's 13, so we do those kinds of things. And she said that Grandma always gets on me to wear my sunscreen, or I'm going to get sunspots on her face like her. I said, and unlike me, because I didn't know either, because my mom didn't start getting them until recently. And this may seem like a frivolous example, but it is connected to the adoption. If we would have known that if I would have known my grandmother was more prone to that, then certainly my mom would have been wearing sunscreen like religiously, and so would have I all through my teen and 20s, even elementary school, and we're really strict on my daughter on wearing that. So even something simple like that, if you translate that to a medical condition, how handy would that medical information be? I hope that wasn't too far off the beaten track for me. But it's true with international adoption, you just don't always, nowadays sometimes you have access to a little more. But this is why it's just so wonderful to have these birth moms voluntarily sharing about themselves, and they're wanting to have their child know their history as much as they, can share about themselves.
Yes. So don't overstress. I would say that's the thing. Don't overstress if you're reading the 19-year-old's paperwork and she doesn't know the answers to some of the questions because maybe she doesn't have someone to ask, but she may also not even think to have asked.
Mhm.
And then sometimes there are also things that any woman may not even know to bring up, and we will prompt her and
Mhm.
fill it out. You know, if for instance there's a medical condition of concern, she may not know the name of it, but she might explain symptoms, and then we may be able to consult someone or know from our experience that this is a possible diagnosis or a possible name for that. So
Mhm.
I just want to reassure most of you listening, though, that most of the babies who are adopted through Lifetime are just healthy, average little babies. And
Mhm.
I would say probably the most common thing we see in family medical history would be something that all of us probably could check off, which would be cancer or some sort of blood pressure issue, something sort of common and average in America.
Mhm. And we hardly ever have surprises. Like Blippi said, most birth moms are very forthcoming, and many will volunteer more information than we're even asking because they know how important that is to the process in being able to secure a match with that family who is truly open and aware of everything that's going on in her pregnancy. So it's important to her to have that stability. I saw an email from a birth mom, just something, the way she worded it was, I just want to make sure that I do have this match. Everything is all set, right? Like, it's important to them to know that they have everything prepared for this baby, and part of that relies on you as the adoptive parents, truly being committed to this child. So I think for me, understanding the intention of a birth mom helps me feel more at peace with knowing that they are very open with us. And so hopefully that helps you too as adoptive parents.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if there is a surprise that comes up, I mean, surprises can come up, even in a biological pregnancy, not even in adoption. You know, surprises can come up. And if something pops up at any point in the process with this birth mom that is no longer a fit within your preferences, so that if it's a certain characteristic that you had a no on your preferences, and nobody knew that this was going to play a role in this adoption, and it's new information that has now come up, you are not expected to continue on with that adoption. We trust that you have carefully laid out the preferences for us to follow, and we have never knowingly put you in a position of being matched with someone who doesn't fit within that, but that you've chosen those preferences for very good reasons, so we want to honor that and not place any expectation on you to move forward with someone who doesn't fit within what you've said you're okay with. That being said, you will still have the option to continue on if, after all, you've decided on this specific case, it's not going to be a deal breaker for you. You'll continue on, then that's wonderful too. And if you are going to be taking a step back from that adoption, we'll be able to find a different family to step in and, pick up where you left off, as long as you can let us know that when you've decided that. Talk with us directly first so that we can get things arranged for a new family. And then for you, we'll go ahead and start presenting your profile to new birth moms.
Absolutely. I love that you brought that up because you do get a choice, but that to me speaks to why it's so important. If you've looked at our application, or if you're already moving through the application process with Lifetime, maybe had your phone consultation, or even if you're talking to other adoption professionals, even with foster care, you're going to have to answer questions about what would you say yes to, what situations, what opportunities, what child are you looking for? And that's why it's so, so, so important to be honest with yourself about those first, and then definitely honest and open with the professional that's helping you find your child to adopt, so that they can put you in the best possible scenario to say yes. But like Kim said, sometimes there are surprises, and in those cases the best thing to do is to not blame anyone, not point a finger at birth mother, not scream at a hospital staff worker when you learn something. Don't even walk away like it never happened. contact the person who's been helping you coordinate that adoption, that person who's been working with you on that match. Let them know what you learned and stay put until we can stabilize the situation and get another family in. Because you don't want that birth mom to feel like her child is unadoptable, because there is a family for every child. Just because that child wasn't for your family doesn't mean that you're not part of that child's story and helping them reach the family that will raise them, that will be comfortable with their needs, that will welcome them home. And don't beat yourself up either. You know, we've worked with families in those situations, and I know it's hard to say no. It's so hard to say no, especially when you've seen a child already. You've seen that baby, maybe even held that baby. But once in a while things happen. And, I mean, let's face it, that's why birth mothers are choosing adoption. Things happen that they didn't expect, and they're not ready to bring that child home. So we understand that every once in a while that may come up. But it's pretty rare, especially when you're really upfront about what you're looking for and what you're comfortable with, and that you're not just saying you're open to things so that you look good on paper. But I will also share that I have worked with families that were faced with those unexpected details and felt truly to the core of their soul that they were led to that baby for a reason, and it must be their child, and they chose to move forward. So be open to that too. Be open to learning more before you say no. But honesty is best, but also handling it with care and respect so that the birth mother doesn't feel like her baby's unwanted. Because even if she's in a really, really, really difficult or even a really negative and bad situation, she still wants to know that her child is lovable and acceptable. And you're a big part of that for her. You're a big part of that reassurance for her that her history, that her story isn't negatively reflecting on that child's future.
Good point. And on the other side of the coin, you know, when it comes to trying to keep the emotional roller coaster to a minimum and try to spare adoptive parents from feeling so rejected when they don't get chosen, part of that goes back to your preferences, to where we know exactly what your parameters are for your adoption. And we can proactively present your profile to birth moms that match up everything with you, that you meet what she's looking for in a family, and she fits within what you've decided you're okay with in your adoption. So we can go forward. And you're waiting. You don't know about every birth mom who's being sent your profile, because it's really not a personal rejection when she chooses a different family, like Libby was saying earlier in our talk today. So we try to just, you know, keep that emotional roller coaster to a minimum by presenting you with the details of the birth mom who is interested and has followed through with the paperwork and the information that we need in order to help her plan the adoption. She's made it to that point and is now eligible to match, and she read your profile and wants you. You know, she's asking for you. So then that's when we call you and let you know all about her. So every consideration we have for birth moms, we also have for adoptive parents. Sometimes it seems like we talk more about the birth mom side, but that's just because that's the side most adoptive parents don't know about. You know. So.
Right. Well, and that's you made me think too. Whenever you see adoption stories online or people posting about, yay, I'm matched, or maybe you hear about matches that are happening or adoptions that just took place, and if you have the tendency to think, why wasn't that me? Why wasn't that my baby? Why didn't that birth mom pick my profile? You also have to remember that there's sometimes more to the story, you know, especially because every adoption has a lot of confidential aspects. You know, we can't post every single detail about something that you may not have been open to. We never want to put a family in a position where they're saying, gosh, I hate saying this, but I don't know why you called me on that. I told you I wasn't looking for that opportunity. So remember, there's always more to the story, especially also when you're hearing people's experience online or when you're in support groups, that most people will not usually disclose every detail about their journey to adopt. I don't always know why exactly, but like the biggest example I have is, when you're coming across people that are discouraged or they were unsuccessful somewhere, you sometimes have to question, was there any part of that that you may have contributed to? For instance, did you complete all the steps that I know I've already completed? So it's just good to keep perspective and remember that it's also about you and your journey and where you're headed, and to stay focused on that too. Kim, I wanted to visit, there were a couple questions that kind of circled around open adoption. One of them said, are all of Lifetime's adoptions open? And the other one said, where did it go? I like the wording. We would like to know if we have to have contact with the birth mom. So let's talk a little bit about Open Adoption 101 and what that looks like, but also about what a typical adoption looks like at Lifetime.
Okay, so the word open in open adoption is referring to the communication, that there's some form of communication between you and that birth mom. You know a little about her, and she may know a little about you. Now, the type of information that you know about her versus the type of information she knows about you is going to be different because you have different intents and purposes here in this adoption. You're looking at characteristics and health and, of the child, so there's different information that you're going to be, finding more valuable. For her, she's looking more at, well, your values, your lifestyle, so you're not going to be sharing probably your last name or what exact city you live in or what company you work for, whereas you may know all of those things about her. So the sharing of information will guide you through that, and in our program you're going to know everything we know about that birth mom. So by nature of the way we work, it's probably not going to be a closed adoption 100%. Most birth moms do want some form of contact on into the future just to know that they made the right choice and how the child is doing, and also to be available for some of those medical questions that may arise, or to provide a picture of herself so that the child can know who she physically resembles. Different things like that can be very healthy to the upbringing of that child, and most birth moms are, who are choosing adoption for their baby would like to furnish that for their child going forward. And they may be wishing for letters and photos to be sent to them twice a year. Or they might like a family that can see them once or twice a year in a public neutral location, like have lunch. I've been calling it like a play date lately because I think that's real easy for people to understand that it's in a neutral location. She's responsible for her own travel. It's only as long as everything's healthy with her at that time. I mean, you wouldn't have a play date with someone who's not healthy to be around, So apply those same kinds of principles to planning your visit with a birth mom, and it does not give her any parental rights or anything like that. Most of our adoptions veer more toward open adoption because we are such a huge advocate for open adoption in the adoption community. When birth moms have the opportunity to learn about this and truly know their options, they usually themselves veer more naturally toward open adoption and find a lot of comfort in that as they're planning their adoption. And some will say in the beginning they'd like a closed adoption, but the very next day they're texting with the adoptive parents. So right there, it's no longer closed.
And that's funny you bring that up because I just got back from a conference where Lifetime was doing some outreach to educate and train people who are working at pregnancy centers and clinics and helping women learn more about their pregnancy options. And I was having a conversation with a few of them, and then I was discussing with our director later about the direction of our training in the future. I really think it's time to even get rid of the word semi-open adoption, because there's no such thing as open adoption in a box. You don't get like one recipe for adoption and then there's 3 different types of recipes. open adoption is so personal. It's so individual because it's involving unique people, just like any relationship, any friendship, any family connection. And I mean, I have dozens and dozens of cousins. I'm very close with some, have a great friendship with the others, but we're not in touch all the time. And then there's some that I know their names, I care about what's happening with them, but we're not in touch. And I don't, but they're still all family. I don't have like the semi-family box and the open family, like,
Such a good example.
I think it's so important to remember that here's what often will play out. Even if I get a birth mother who calls and asks about closed adoption, yeah, hi Kim, do you do closed adoption? We're going to say, yes, we can do a closed adoption for you, but let me ask you a few questions. And we'll usually ask her, do you want to know your baby's parents' names at least? Yeah, that would be nice. Would you like to choose your baby's adoptive parent? Oh yeah, that would be really great. I would like, could I even talk to them on the phone? Yes, you can. So even if she only wants that interaction right before the adoption happens, it's an open adoption. And then thinking about contact later, you will probably be surprised that you'll actually want it. You will want to tell her how your beautiful baby is doing. You will want to brag on your baby. I love when adoptive moms call or come on webinars or email us with updates and they tell us how I actually love having contact with my baby's birth mother because she's the only other one in this earth who loves this stuff as much as I do. You know, you think about, I mean, Kim can brag about her daughter all she wants to me, and I think it's awesome, and I think her daughter is great, but it's not going to light me up like it lights Kim up because that's her baby, that's her daughter. And so you will probably find that you'll actually want even to know how she's doing. There's so many adoptive parents who say, you know, she doesn't write back as much as she used to in the beginning, or it's been a really long time since we heard from her, and sometimes we just worry about her. We want to know that she's doing okay, that she's happy, she's healthy, she's, you know, not living on the streets somewhere. You know, they want to know how she's doing. But they also want to be a reassurance to her. Hey, look how great your baby's doing. Look at this amazing family you gave us. And birth moms are all different. Some of them want to have that connection ongoing for the next however many decades. Others may want it right away and then sort of ebb and flow throughout the child's life in your home. Others may surface after 5 years. Maybe, wow, I realized little John just turned 5 and he's probably starting kindergarten, and I know that I never really wanted contact, but now I'm kind of curious how you guys are doing. And that's the awesome thing with open adoption, is that it's not something like the old days, like Kim was explaining, where there's no backtrack, there's no history, there's no tracing of records of what happened to so-and-so or where did so-and-so come from. It gives you the ability to have answers.
But what about, you know, if the birth mom sees how great the child is doing and then wants them back?
Well, I would like to answer that question by recommending that everyone go watch this beautiful adoption story by a woman named Adrienne that we just posted. You can go to lifetimeadoption.com/stories, STORIES, and watch Adrienne's video, because she even says at the end of that video, sometimes people ask me, well, would you want to get your son back? Would you want to raise your son? And she says in the video, I would never want to break the hearts of the people who have given my son everything, the people who are raising my son. I know what a good job they're doing. I know how happy he is. I would never want to disrupt that for him. And I think her statement is true for every other birth mother who's had a positive and loving adoption decision happen in her child's best interest. Now, you may come across women typically from the old days of adoption where maybe they felt more forced, and they may have wished that they could have gotten their child back because they felt like it was out of their hands. And by the time they got strength and courage to speak up for themselves, it was too late to change their minds. But these days, because a woman she gets every say. She gets to choose adoptive parents. She gets to know them as much as she wants. She can even talk with you, meet with you, and then even seeing you interact with her baby at the hospital is such a huge reassurance to her. And so by the time she gets to that time when she can't change her mind, she may wish that she'd never had to gone through that. Sure, she may wish that she was never in a position where she couldn't raise the baby she became pregnant with. That's reasonable, but it doesn't mean she regrets what happens, and it doesn't mean that she would want to take her baby back and out of the life she gave her baby, because that's what's happened. She gave her baby that life. Why would she take that back?
Mm-hmm. Whew, preach.
I hope that eliminates a little bit of fear. But go watch Adrienne's story. If you have not seen her story, I think it will reassure most people who are uncertain about open adoption. I think it will make them actually hope that they would be chosen by a woman like Adrienne, and to have the kind of connection that she's grown with her son and his adoptive family. It's normal for them. It's extended family for them. They care about each other. They're not in touch. They don't see each other every month. They don't see each other every holiday. Make a point to get together around his birthday. And then sometimes through these last 9 years, they've gotten together. If one of them happened to be in the town of the other, they might have said, hey, you want to get together for lunch or something like that. But it's just amazing to see how they've made the most of open adoption in a really healthy way for the child.
Mm-hmm. And it's natural to have fears and concerns. There are unknowns, and we can help shed light on those. So talk with us about that, so that we can remedy that fear or concern with facts, and share with you the perspective that we've seen in these birth moms who are voluntarily planning modern-day adoptions. It changes everything just to have that information.
Well, and remember, too, I think the hardest thing, sometimes we compare adoption to marriage. None of us in today's age would be very comfortable with an arranged marriage. Honestly, I could see a few of the benefits just because dating is but most people these days want to say and who they spend the rest of their life with. And when you have the prospect of marrying a stranger, it's going to create a lot more anxiety than marrying somebody that you've actually chosen to love. And in adoption, even though you don't choose your baby's birth mom, you don't get to go to a list of birth mothers and say, I want to get to know that one. Even though it's going the other way, you're being pursued by her. She's choosing her baby's parents. You still get to know each other. And so creating a relationship with one individual is a lot less intimidating, scary, and anxiety-ridden than having an open adoption with a dozen unknown birth mothers. You're not having open adoption with a ton of strangers. You're having open adoption with one woman you've gotten to know.
Also, you've gotten to choose who gets to choose you by setting up your preferences. I'm like a preferences harpy, hounding on these preferences. Okay. But it's so true, right? Like, you got to choose who gets to choose you. And from the beginning, she was only sent your profile because you'd already decided a birth mom or baby with those characteristics was going to be fine with you, Exactly. So you do have, a say in that.
So for those of you who maybe would have agreed with those questions about open adoption, does that help at all? We'd love to know that. The other thing I always like to add is if you're learning about the different types of adoption and you just know in your gut, I don't think me or both of us, or I don't think my husband, wherever you are, if open adoption doesn't settle right with you, my first recommendation is always to learn more before you close the door. But if you know with confidence that that's not the right path for your family, don't go down that path. Don't put yourself in a position where you're just going to feel uncomfortable and ultimately cut off a woman who's trusting you to have open adoption. You never want to do that. So it's okay to pursue other types of adoption. Maybe international is better, maybe foster care. There could be another way. So don't feel forced into this because this is the time we're living in. You still have options. But I would say the majority of people who eventually learn more about open adoption and hear real-life stories usually find their hearts softening for it, and they have an understanding, and their expectations and their fears change with the truth.
Mm-hmm. And usually once they start learning what closed adoption really is, they're like, whoa, I can't believe I ever said I wanted that. Because it's a complete lack of background.
We had sort of an exception to the rule here. Someone said, I saw a recent story on the news about a birth father who was able to get his baby back because he was not aware of the adoption plan. In those cases, I would say there's usually more to the story.
I saw that too,
You always have to question. Usually for us at Lifetime, when we hear those stories, we think, well, did someone take legal shortcuts? And was someone lying? And it's not always about the birth mom lying. Sometimes it's about not hiring people who are experienced with adoption law. That's why it's so important. If your adoption coordinator recommends a certain attorney or a process for you to complete your match safely and successfully, take that advice. Don't take shortcuts.
And there may be a referral given to you specifically. There may be a referral given to you specifically based on some of the characteristics of your case, not just what state, you know. So it might be someone who specializes in this specific type of case. And you definitely want to work with someone who's not just experienced, but reputable and ethical. And you'll only learn that by word of mouth. You know, and here at Lifetime, the referrals we give come after years and years, like for the most part, more than 10 years of experience working with that specific attorney.
Absolutely. And also, when there are concerns, at least in our program, we have attorneys who are willing to speak with women who are just thinking about adoption and answer legal questions before they get too far into considering families or making steps to get to know adoptive parents. It's very common when I'll get a call from a woman that'll say, so can I still do adoption if my situation is like this with the father of the baby? And we'll talk about it, and I will usually recommend that she talk with an attorney before she decide what she thinks about adoption, just so she knows if there's going to be any hurdles and if she's willing to face those, or what she's going to have to do to get him on board or to make the adoption happen when she's ready for it to happen. So we're usually trying to sort of like beat that head on before that birth mother even gets to you. And then that way we also have more information about what that process will be for you to complete that child's adoption too. So
that's a good point. That doesn't come up very often, but it is another part of what we're doing when we're walking with birth mom before you're involved.
Exactly. And that's why I think I've been thinking a lot lately about Lifetime services, and I think it's easy to focus on the front end and what we're doing to help families get ready, but really a huge asset for you at Lifetime as being one of Lifetime's family is what happens once you're chosen. So even if you're thinking, well, what do you do for me while I'm waiting? Well, there may not be a lot to do once you're ready and waiting. You know, we still offer regular support. We have additional webinars that are only open to waiting families. Your coordinator is always available to answer questions and be there for you, but really there's not a lot of action to take. And so while we're, you know, every day presenting you to birth mothers online or in email or mailing out packets, once you're matched, I would say that's when most families realize the value of working with a program like Lifetime, because now they're getting all of the backtracking. They're seeing all the behind-the-scenes stuff that happened just to lead to that one birth mother and introducing them to each other and then moving forward with the match process all the way through the birth. You're not just told about a birth mother and then good luck with that. That's actually when we step in hand in hand, one-on-one, working with your unique match, not just giving you some basics, but actually handling it case by case, your specific adoption match moving forward, all the way to you bringing that baby home, and hopefully you'll keep in touch and let us know how you're doing after you get home. Great. So gosh, this hour just flew by. I feel like we say that every single time, but we had, real quick, I just wanted to say we had a great question that said, are you looking for African American families? And I just want to say a real quick, yes, we are. You know, we have several birth mothers who are requesting African American adoptive parents. So if you're on the call and you identify with that, we'd love for you to apply so we could just explore if we'd be a good fit. We had some great questions about what are the costs, you know, what are the financial responsibilities. If we couldn't get to some of these questions, please reach out to us. I know, Kim, you are amazingly generous with your time, so I'll give out your email because you can also direct them to other people on the team that can better help too. But you can always write to Kim. She works with a lot of families who are having these initial questions, and she helps prepare them either to find the right path through Lifetime or to see Lifetime as a stepping stone in the right direction towards your baby. So Kim can be reached at Kim, K-I-M, at lifetimeadoption.com. That's her email address. And also, if you're already working with a coordinator at Lifetime, whether you have contracted and you're part of the program or if you're just considering the program, remember to reach out to her. If you have a question that sparked tonight, let her know.
Or your coordinator in general.
Exactly. And if you don't know who your coordinator is, you can always just reach out to anyone at Lifetime and we'll get you there. So I just want to encourage all of you to just know how important these questions are in your journey. That's why we love these Q&As. We started doing these a few years ago, and I would say they're one of our best resources because we can just jump around and really touch on things that are on your mind right now. But if you need more information, just remember we're here. We're here to talk with you one-on-one because we don't want you to feel like you're navigating this alone. We want you to feel equipped and empowered and informed so that you're making healthy decisions for your adoption success. So Kim, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up tonight?
If anyone joined late, I'll just review the contact info. You can reach us by phone, 1-800-923-6784. If you are brand new to Lifetime and just starting to explore further and starting that adoption conversation with us, fill out your application on the website, lifetimeadoption.com/apply. And whenever people say, well, should I apply right now if? Once I hear their scenario of what's going on right now, the answer usually still is yes because there's no obligation here. In fact, it can be really helpful to be able to have a resource and a partner who knows who you are and kind of understands what you're looking for and what's going on right now instead of being out there on your own trying to navigate. But definitely filling out the application is the recommended first step to starting a conversation with us, lifetimeadoption.com/apply. Someone commented earlier that the Facebook page is awesome, or they said great. Awesome is more like my word. But facebook.com/open.adoption. And they said just, there are so many beautiful families on there. And we have conversations all the time on our Facebook page that are different from the conversations in our webinars or in our newsletters, etc. So be a part of all these aspects of, Lifetime so that you can stay encouraged. And you never know when a tip you see on Facebook or a tip you hear in a webinar becomes a very important tip for you to implement in your own adoption.
Thank you, Kim. I would just love it if there were several of you I know who are already working with Lifetime and you were giving us updates about your status and where you are with your profile or your home study right now or a certain question. And I love seeing all of that. I want to make sure your coordinator sees that. And so remember to reach out to her. And then also look at your email, and hopefully we'll get to see all of you at next week's webinar. Because we'll have a really great opportunity to ask a lot of these same questions to adoptive moms who are currently living with open adoption, with transracial adoption, with children who are getting old enough to ask questions about their adoption. So you will learn so much from these women, and they have all shared their stories before. This will be a really unique opportunity to sort of pick their brain beyond how they got to their baby, but to really talk about what it's like now and things to consider. So hopefully we'll see that soon. And I thank you all for being here tonight and for all of these questions and comments.
Yes, thank you everyone for your participation, and I'll see you hopefully on the next webinar.
Okay. Have a great night, everyone. Keep in touch. Bye-bye.
Good night. 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 Good night.